All right, welcome to another Mike Reed's review. Today I'm going to be reviewing Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics. I have the hardcover version. I'll post a link to Amazon and the version I have. I'm finding, I'll say this before I get into the actual review. I'm finding when you get to a book, this book is 600 and something pages, 634 pages of just content long, with all kinds of appendices, hundreds of pages of appendices and footnotes. Hundreds of pages of appendices and indices, and etc. So when books get this thick, I'm thinking that I'm learning that the way to purchase them is just to pay the money for the hardcover instead of buying either the soft cover that winds up being this thick and ridiculously hard to keep open, or the one that winds up being 10 different books. So I'll start with that. So I'll give the basic review, get into, I think, let me describe what it basically is. So Basic Economics is Thomas Sowell's, I think he intended it for it to be the academic introduction to the world of economics to those who are totally without any experience in the field. So I think that his intention is to create, for all intents and purposes, a textbook devoid of technical terminology, charts, graphs, and mathematical formulae. Now, what I'll say is I do find it to be a great introduction in terms of its scale. I do believe that his intention is to be exhaustive in terms of basic micro and macroeconomics. I think the two best chapters are the two final chapters. It's the history of economics and his parting thoughts. Here's where I would say it doesn't achieve its goal. It's, I think, intended to read like a textbook. It doesn't read like a textbook. It reads like any other Thomas Sowell book, which, generally speaking, like we have Thomas Sowell's Discrimination and Disparities is a pretty much just 120-page long essay, chapter-divided essay on specifically discrimination and disparities. So instead of taking a single topic, specific topic within the world of economics, this is basically all the complete thoughts, the exhaustive thoughts of Thomas Sowell on his perspective of economics. Now, I agree almost entirely on his personal perspective of economics, but again, it doesn't succeed, I think, in reading like a textbook. So this is not something that if I was teaching the course, I would have as my textbook, because it doesn't break itself up, for example, into easily dividable, easily accessible chapters. So the chapters themselves are effectively essays unto themselves. So if you're looking for a technical term, it would be hard to find it within that chapter. Now, I'll also add that there are no footnotes in this book, which is an extreme rarity. So if I open up to Discrimination and Disparities, for example, to any chapter, right? Let's just open up to page 100. Let's just open up to page 112. We're already on, this is 12 pages into that chapter, and it's already 40 different footnotes. So in terms of his citations, they're not actually in his book. And he does just give a disclaimer in the introduction that they're actually found online. So I find that actually kind of distracting, because that's what I expect out of a Thomas Sowell book. But the other thing that it does is that with those footnotes, you can see exactly when he makes a claim, or if he provides, say, a data point, you can say, well, has he actually cited that, or is that something that he's just putting down as either a general statement or as something that has been commonly accepted as fact and not actually citing a specific source? So there's no way to distinguish that in this book. So I would honestly consider this is far too much reading. I mean, far too much reading for someone to be considered who is absolutely unacquainted with this subject for this to be a proper introduction. If it were an outright textbook and you were teaching an academic course in economics, an introductory level economics, I would say then yes, it has served its purpose. But I don't think that it does that. I would actually say that his own Economic Facts and Fallacies, which is a much shorter read, which I believe is 200 or so pages long, does a much more effective job at taking somebody who has no experience whatsoever in the world of economics and giving them just a taste, just an introduction. Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson similarly does a better job of that. Now, that said, this to me, if you're into Thomas Sowell and if you've read those two books, this is the logical next step because it takes all of his ideas and puts them into a single book. So this to me is better read as a compilation of Thomas Sowell's perspective of economics, really the Chicago school's perspective of economics, if I'm being perfectly honest. So as far as the content is concerned, the content itself is absolutely 10 out of 10. And I have to toot my own horn briefly here. This is the first time I've ever read cover to cover in one concerted effort a more than 600-page book. So as far as the content is concerned, the writing style is very readable. It's very accessible. It's not some sort of professorial dissertation that nobody's going to understand. Or, Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations is considered the father of modern economic literature, but it is a brutal, brutal read, especially in its sentences, which can be whole pages long and can at times be grammatically a bear, to say the least, and which insists on using archaic measurement standards. This is actually a very accessible read, but I would say that it doesn't succeed in doing what it I think intends to do. So, in conclusion, I'll say on my scale of 1 to 10, I always like to leave everybody with my points on the scale of 1 to 10. This might be as low as a 6 for me. I'm having trouble deciding between a 6 and a 7. Gun to my head, I would have to say 7. But if I'm taking this from an unbiased perspective, from somebody who doesn't like Sowell, it might be a 6. But that's not because the content isn't good. The content is excellent. It's just too much for it to be an introductory book, and it doesn't succeed in what it intends to do, which is to be an academic textbook, I think. And again, if I were to have an introductory level economics course, I wouldn't have this book. I'd have a lot of his other works, but I wouldn't have this one because it's just too much for one read. So that's been my review of Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics. Again, I actually liked it, so don't get my 1 to 10 scale wrong in this matter. It's either a 6 or a 7 for me. I can't honestly tell. I would actually recommend its purchase if you are serious about reading Thomas Sowell and honest about getting his total perspective, because in one book it does give a very thorough read of his perspective of economics. So that's been my review of Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics. Thanks for sticking with me. Until then, this has been Mike, signing off.